My name is Sofia Williams, 32 years old, and 2 years ago I walked away from my six-figure corporate tech job to pursue a startup dream no one believed in. My family made it clear they thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life. They started introducing me as their daughter who was between jobs, or worse, trying to find herself. Tonight at my brother James's engagement dinner, I was doing my best to stay invisible, answering vague questions about my work with rehearsed deflections. Then his fiancée Elizabeth looked at me from across the table, her champagne glass freezing midair, and said those words that made the entire room go silent. "Wait. You're the founder of NeuraTech. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. My story might just give you the courage you need." Growing up in a brownstone in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, my family looked picture-perfect from the outside. My father Thomas built his entire identity around being the manager at First National Bank, where he worked for 40 years without a single career change. He wore the same style of navy suit every day, left the house at 7:15 each morning, and returned at 6:20 on the dot. My mother Diana ran the administration office at the local high school with the same clockwork precision. Their lives were built on routine stability and, most importantly, security. Then there was my older brother James, the golden child who followed our father's footsteps into the financial world. He majored in finance at Boston University, joined a prestigious investment firm right after graduation, and climbed the corporate ladder exactly as expected. Every promotion was celebrated with a special dinner. Every bonus was announced to the extended family. James was the model child, who never veered from the prescribed path to success. And then there was me. From the moment I discovered our family computer at age 10, I was captivated. While other kids played outside, I taught myself basic coding, fascinated by how I could create something from nothing but lines of text. By 14, I was building websites for neighbors and my school club. My parents referred to it as Sofia playing around on computers again whenever relatives asked about my interests. When I brought home a flyer about a high school computer science competition, my mother frowned and said, "That is nice, dear, but maybe you should focus on activities that will actually prepare you for a real career." My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. The day I got accepted to MIT for computer science should have been one of the proudest moments for my parents. Instead, my father asked why I hadn't applied for business school instead. "Computers are for programmers who work for the people with business degrees," he said over dinner. "You are smart enough to be the one in charge, not the one in the back room typing code." I graduated with honors, but at my graduation party, all my parents could talk about was how James had just been promoted to junior vice president at his firm. My achievement was reduced to small talk about Sofia's computer degree. That stung, but I had learned to lower my expectations by then. My first job at NeuraTech impressed even my parents temporarily. The salary was excellent, the benefits comprehensive, and the prestige factor significant enough that my father could brag to his colleagues about his daughter working for a Fortune 500 company. For about 6 months, I was finally doing something they understood and approved of. I had a corner office business cards and a title that sounded important. For the first time, I was included in the family success narrative. But corporate life slowly suffocated my creativity. Each day in that glass tower felt more constraining than the last. The endless meetings, the bureaucratic approval processes, the innovation that moved at a glacial pace because of internal politics. I was good at my job developing enterprise software solutions, but I wasn't making any real impact. The idea for NeuraTech came after my grandmother had a stroke. Watching her recovery process, I noticed how inefficient and fragmented the healthcare system was. The doctors had no unified way to track her progress or predict outcomes. Each specialist worked in isolation, often repeating tests or missing crucial information from other departments. The technology they used was outdated at best, non-existent at worst. One night, sitting in her hospital room while she slept, I sketched out the first version of what would become NeuraTech's core technology, an artificial intelligence system that could integrate patient data across multiple platforms, predict treatment outcomes, and give healthcare providers a comprehensive view of each patient's journey. For 3 months, I worked on the concept every night and weekend, building a prototype that made me increasingly excited about its potential. The more I researched, the more convinced I became that this could transform healthcare outcomes and efficiency. My algorithm was showing promising results even in its early stages. The day I decided to quit my job, I felt equal parts terrified and exhilarated. I had a sizable savings account, a detailed business plan, and a small investment promise from my college roommate who had done well in the startup world. What I did not have was my family's support, but I was about to find out just how much that would hurt. I planned the announcement carefully, choosing a Sunday family dinner where everyone would be relaxed. I had rehearsed my pitch, prepared answers to potential objections, and even brought a simple presentation on my tablet to show them the market research and financial projections. I was 30 years old with an Ivy League education and years of industry experience. Surely they would see the potential even if they had concerns. I was wrong. You want to do what my father's voice could have frozen the Atlantic Ocean in July. The dinner rolls in his hand remained suspended halfway to his plate as he stared at me with disbelief that quickly morphed into anger. I am starting my own company, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. NeuraTech will develop artificial intelligence solutions for healthcare providers to improve patient outcomes and operational efficiency. You are throwing away a perfectly good career to play entrepreneur. His face reddened as his voice rose. Do you have any idea how irresponsible that is? How many people would kill for your position at Gartner? This is not how we raised you, Sofia. My mother's approach was less explosive but equally painful. Tears formed in her eyes as she put down her fork with deliberate care. I just do not understand why you always need to make things so difficult for yourself, she said, her voice quivering. Why can you not be content with what you have? A good job, good benefits, security. James sat silently across the table, examining his wine glass with sudden interest. He would not meet my eyes, and his silence felt like another form of betrayal. The healthcare technology market is projected to reach $100 billion by next year. I tried explaining, pulling up the market research slide on my tablet. My solution addresses critical gaps that current providers are not touching. I have already developed a working prototype and… Enough! My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. I do not want to hear about prototypes and market projections. I want you to come to your senses. People like us do not quit stable jobs to chase fantasies. We work hard, we stay the course, we build security. That is how success happens. Later that night, as I was putting on my coat to leave, James finally approached me in the hallway. You know they just want what is best for you, he said, his voice low, to avoid being overheard. And you think this is a mistake too, I replied, not bothering to phrase it as a question. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Look, Sofia, starting a business is incredibly risky. The statistics on startup failures are not in your favor. I just think you should consider what you are giving up before you jump. That night was the beginning of my exile from the family narrative. In the following weeks, I learned from my cousin Rachel that my parents were telling relatives I was between jobs or taking some time to reassess my career options. Never once did they mention NeuraTech or my founder status. It was as if my business did not exist, as if my dream was too embarrassing to acknowledge. The erasure hurt more than outright disapproval would have. At least with disapproval, there would have been recognition of my choice. This felt like they were waiting for me to fail, so they could welcome me back to reality without ever having to acknowledge my deviation from their plan. My initial confidence began to waver as the weeks passed. I moved from my comfortable downtown apartment to a tiny studio in a less desirable part of the city to conserve funds. Every penny needed to go toward building NeuraTech. My furniture consisted of a mattress on the floor, a desk I found on the street corner, and a single chair. The walls remained bare, except for my whiteboard covered with code and flowcharts. The loneliness was perhaps the hardest part. I worked 18-hour days sleeping only when my vision blurred too much to continue staring at my computer screen. There was no one to celebrate small victories, with no one to comfort me after rejections or setbacks. When I hit a major coding breakthrough at 3 a.m, there was no one to tell. The first working prototype of my healthcare AI platform was completed after 4 months of intensive work. When I ran the initial simulation and saw the results, I literally jumped up and danced around my tiny apartment. The algorithm successfully predicted treatment outcomes with 78% accuracy, far better than anything currently on the market. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to call my parents and share my excitement, but I knew what the response would be. My finger hovered over their contact in my phone before I put it down. Instead, I celebrated alone with a cheap bottle of wine and takeout Chinese food, watching the sun rise over the city skyline from my window, wondering if this victory would ever be enough for them to see me. Just as I was preparing to approach investors with my prototype, an envelope arrived in the mail. Thick cream paper with elegant calligraphy, an invitation to James's engagement party. After months of minimal contact, seeing the formal invitation felt strange, almost like it was meant for someone else, a different Sofia who still belonged in their world. At the bottom, my mother had scrawled a brief note. "We hope you can make it. James wants the whole family there." Not a word about my life, my work, or any acknowledgement of the growing distance between us. Just an expectation that I would show up and play my assigned role in the family theater. I traced my fingers over the embossed lettering and wondered what version of myself I would need to be to survive that evening. The first year of running NeuraTech taught me that rejection comes in many forms, and none of them get easier with repetition. I was rejected by 27 investors in the span of 4 months. Some were polite, citing market concerns or limited bandwidth in their portfolio. Others were brutally direct. Healthcare is not a space for disruption by tech startups, one older venture capitalist told me, barely looking up from his phone during my presentation. Especially not startups run by girls with computers who have no medical background. I left that meeting fighting back tears, but by the time I reached the subway, my sadness had hardened into determination. I would prove him wrong, prove them all wrong. My savings dwindled alarmingly fast. Rent cloud computing costs legal fees for patents and incorporation, and the basic necessities of life ate through my carefully planned runway. I started living on ramen noodles and the cheapest groceries I could find, cutting every possible expense. My social life became non-existent. Friends stopped calling after I declined their invitations too many times, unable to justify spending money on dinners out or concert tickets when my business needed every dollar. The loneliness was crushing some days. I would work until 2 or 3 in the morning, fall asleep for a few hours, then wake up and do it all again. There was no weekend, no holiday, no break. Just me, my laptop, and the growing fear that maybe my family had been right all along. Then I met Dr. Alicia Torres at a healthcare technology conference I had scraped together the registration fee to attend. I was there handing out business cards and trying to network, feeling out of place among established companies with their elaborate booths and promotional materials. My booth consisted of my laptop on a small table in the least desirable corner of the exhibition hall. Dr. Torres stopped by during a slow period, curious about the neural network diagrams on my screen. Unlike other attendees who smiled politely and moved on, she asked detailed, insightful questions about my algorithm and its applications. As chief of neurology at Boston Memorial Hospital, she immediately grasped the potential impact of what I was building. "This could change how we approach recovery prediction," she said, her eyes bright with interest. "The pattern recognition capabilities you are describing would allow us to personalize treatment plans based on significantly more data points than we currently use." By the end of our conversation, Dr. Torres had agreed to become an advisor to NeuraTech and connected me with a small healthcare innovation grant that her hospital administered. The $25,000 was a fraction of what I needed, but it kept the lights on for another 3 months and gave me something even more valuable: validation from someone within the industry. With Dr. Torres's guidance, I refined the platform to better address the specific needs of neurological departments. The grant also allowed me to bring on my first employee, Ryan Kim, a brilliant data scientist who believed in the mission enough to accept a below-market salary and equity instead. "My mother had a brain aneurysm last year," he told me during his interview. "I watched doctors make decisions with incomplete information because their systems could not talk to each other. If we can fix that, I want to be part of it." Working with Ryan accelerated our development exponentially. What had taken me weeks to code alone, we could now accomplish in days. His expertise in machine learning complemented my healthcare focus, and for the first time I had someone to celebrate the small victories with, someone who understood both the technical challenges and the mission driving us forward. The major breakthrough came 6 months into our partnership. Our algorithm demonstrated the ability to predict stroke recovery outcomes with 87% accuracy, significantly outperforming existing solutions. We achieved this by incorporating a wider range of data points, including social determinants of health that traditional models ignored. Dr. Torres helped us secure a pilot program at Boston Memorial Hospital's neurology department. The day our software was installed on their systems was the first time I truly believed NeuraTech might actually succeed. Seeing medical professionals using something I had created from nothing, something born from my grandmother's hospital room, felt surreal. The pilot program generated results that exceeded even our optimistic projections. Patient recovery time improved by 22% when treatment plans were adjusted based on our recommendations. Readmission rates dropped by 17%. The hospital administration took notice, and word began to spread through their network. A medical technology journal published a small feature on our pilot program, highlighting the innovative approach and promising results. I sent the article to my parents without comment, hoping they might finally see legitimacy in what I was building. My mother replied with a brief text. "Nice to see your computer work is going well. Have you thought about applying at the hospital's IT department? They probably have good benefits." I stopped sharing my professional progress with them after that. The real surprise came when Innovators Under 40 magazine contacted me about being profiled in their annual issue featuring emerging leaders in technology. The photo shoot and interview were scheduled for the same week I received a formal invitation to James's engagement dinner. The invitation included a handwritten note specifying +1 in a circle with my mother's scrawled addition. "Is there anyone special in your life these days?" The implication was clear. They expected me to still be single, still be struggling, still be failing, according to their definition of success. I looked around my office now, a real space, with 4 employees and actual furniture, and laughed at the disconnect between their perception and my reality. I decided not to correct their assumptions just yet. Let them think what they wanted to think. The truth would come out eventually, and I would be ready when it did. NeuraTech grew at a pace that sometimes left me breathless. What began as a 2-person operation working out of my tiny apartment transformed into a real company with 15 employees in just 8 months. We moved into actual office space, a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and huge windows that flooded the space with natural light. Every desk was filled with talented people who believed in our mission. The pilot program at Boston Memorial expanded to 3 other hospitals in their network, each showing similar improvements in patient outcomes. Healthcare administrators began reaching out to us, rather than us having to chase them down, and a major hospital chain on the West Coast signed a contract to implement our system across all 12 of their locations. The validation finally attracted serious investor attention. After nearly 18 months of bootstrapping and operating on minimal funds, we secured our first significant round of funding, $2.5 million from a healthcare-focused venture capital firm that specialized in artificial intelligence applications. The day the funds hit our company account, I stood in my office looking out at my team, all busy at their workstations, and felt a wave of vindication so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. I allowed myself one small personal indulgence. To mark the occasion, I moved out of my tiny studio apartment into a decent 1-bedroom in a secure building with an elevator and in-unit laundry. After living with such extreme frugality for so long, these simple amenities felt like extraordinary luxuries. I also finally bought myself clothes that were not from the clearance rack or thrift stores. For months, I had been the founder who wore the same 5 outfits in rotation, too focused on the business to care about appearance. Now I invested in a professional wardrobe that would not look out of place in investor meetings or industry conferences. During this period of growth, my mother called unexpectedly one Sunday afternoon. We had been communicating primarily through brief text messages for months, so her call surprised me. "Sofia, your father and I were wondering if you would like to come for dinner next weekend. It has been a while." The invitation sounded genuine, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps they were finally reaching out with an open mind. "I would like that," I said cautiously. "Things have been quite busy with work, but I can make time." There was a pause before she asked the question that deflated my hope instantly. "So have you found a real job yet? Or are you still doing that computer project?" I closed my eyes, absorbing the blow. NeuraTech now employed 15 people, had 4 hospital contracts, and had just raised millions in funding. Yet in her eyes, it was still just that computer project. I am still running my company, Mom, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. It is going well. Well, you know you can always talk to your father if you need help finding something more stable, she said, her tone suggesting she was offering a great kindness. His bank is always looking for bright people. After that conversation, I made a conscious decision to stop sharing details of my professional life with my family. The constant dismissal was a drain on my emotional energy, and I needed all my focus for growing NeuraTech. I attended the occasional family dinner when invited, gave vague answers about work being busy or going fine, and changed the subject as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, NeuraTech continued its upward trajectory. Our user base expanded to 20 hospitals across the country. Our team grew to 25 people, including 3 medical doctors who joined our clinical advisory board. The company valuation reached $20 million on paper, a figure that still seemed unreal to me whenever I thought about it. Media coverage increased steadily. Local business journals wrote features about the promising Boston startup transforming healthcare technology. Industry publications highlighted our innovative approach to integrating artificial intelligence with medical decision-making. I gave interviews and appeared on healthcare technology panels, gradually becoming more comfortable in the public eye. Yet somehow all of this flew under my family's radar. They did not read the industry publications where we were featured. They did not follow technology news or startup developments. In their world, success looked like my brother James, a vice president at a well-established financial institution, engaged to Elizabeth Porter, daughter of a prominent Boston family, with a life that followed the expected script perfectly. The disconnect between my growing confidence in professional settings and the shrinking feeling I still experienced around my family created a strange cognitive dissonance. In investor meetings and industry conferences, I was Sofia Williams, founder and CEO of one of the most promising healthcare technology startups in Boston. People listened when I spoke, respected my expertise, and valued my vision. At family gatherings, I was still just Sofia, the daughter who had inexplicably walked away from a good job to pursue some incomprehensible computer business that they assumed would fail any day now. As James's engagement dinner approached, the company hit another milestone. We were invited to present at the prestigious Healthcare Innovation Summit in Chicago, an event that typically featured only established companies and industry leaders. The invitation recognized NeuraTech as one of the emerging forces reshaping healthcare technology. The event would take place just 2 weeks after the engagement dinner. I should have been entirely focused on preparing for this career-defining opportunity. Instead, I found myself standing in front of my closet the evening of the engagement dinner, deliberately choosing one of my older, simpler dresses rather than any of the polished professional outfits I now wore to investor meetings. I pulled my hair back in a basic ponytail instead of the more sophisticated style I had adopted for business events. I even minimized my makeup. I was not trying to hide my success exactly. I just did not have the emotional energy for the questions, the surprise, the sudden shift in how they would see me. Tonight was supposed to be about James and Elizabeth. Let them have the spotlight without the complication of realizing the family failure might not be failing after all. Looking in the mirror before leaving, I wondered when I had started making myself smaller to fit their perception of me, and why, despite all evidence to the contrary, part of me still cared what they thought. The restaurant James had chosen for his engagement dinner screamed old money Boston. Dark wood paneling, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths so crisp they could probably stand on their own, and waiters who moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had perfected invisibility as an art form. It was exactly the kind of place my parents approved of, traditional and expensive without being flashy. I arrived exactly 7 minutes late, a calculated decision to avoid the awkward mingling period before everyone was seated. The maitre d' led me to the private dining room, where my family and several of James's future in-laws were already arranged around a long table. My mother spotted me first, rising from her chair with a wave that seemed more about directing my behavior than welcoming me. "Sophia, there you are. Come meet Elizabeth's parents." The introductions proceeded with mechanical politeness. Elizabeth herself was surprisingly warm, greeting me with genuine interest rather than the cool assessment I had expected from someone who is marrying into our family dynamic. "James has told me so much about you," she said, squeezing my hand with both of hers. She was tall and elegant in a midnight blue dress, her dark hair swept up in a sophisticated twist. "I have been looking forward to finally meeting you." I wondered exactly what James had told her about his sister, the family disappointment, but her smile seemed sincere. "All good things, I hope," I replied with a small laugh. "Of course." Her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "He said you were always the brilliant one in the family." Before I could process that unexpected comment, my father called for everyone to take their seats. I found myself placed between my Aunt Patricia and my cousin Thomas, safely distanced from the center of attention where James Elizabeth and both sets of parents Saturday. The first course arrived with the predictable family dynamics already in full swing. My father dominated the conversation, telling elaborate stories about James's childhood achievements and recent professional triumphs. Just made vice president. Before 32, he announced to Elizabeth's father, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and tortoiseshell glasses, youngest in the firm's history to reach that level. Always knew he had it in him. My mother beamed beside him occasionally, adding details to his stories or correcting small points to demonstrate her equal participation in James's success narrative. We always emphasized the importance of dedication and following through. James never gave up on anything he started. The unspoken comparison to me hung in the air, at least to my ears. I took a long sip of wine and prepared for the inevitable moment when someone would turn their attention my way. It came during the second course when my Aunt Patricia leaned toward me with the particular smile she reserved for uncomfortable questions. "Sophia, dear, what are you up to these days? Still with that computer company?" "I am working in healthcare technology," I replied, using the deliberately vague phrasing I had perfected for family gatherings. "Oh, are you with one of the big hospital systems?" She perked up, clearly thinking I had finally found suitable employment. "No, I am still with my own company. We develop artificial intelligence solutions for healthcare providers." Her face fell slightly. "Oh, that is nice. Is that going well? It must be so difficult in this economy." Before I could respond with another practiced non-answer, my Uncle Robert joined in. "You know, Patricia's neighbor's son works in IT at Massachusetts General. Very stable position, excellent benefits. I could put you in touch if you are interested." "Thank you, but I'm quite happy with my current situation," I said, cutting a piece of salmon with perhaps more force than necessary. "Well, the offer stands. Never hurts to have a backup plan." He patted my hand as if I were a child being gently guided back to reality. My cousin Thomas, who worked at my father's bank, leaned in next. "Banking is always hiring talented people, too. With your education, you could start in a good position, despite, well, the gap in traditional employment." I had forgotten how exhausting these conversations could be. The constant implication that what I was doing was not real work, not a real career, not a real contribution. That I was just passing time until I came to my senses. The dinner progressed with more of the same. James's professional achievements and upcoming wedding were discussed in extensive detail. Elizabeth's career as an art curator at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts received approving nods from all sides. My cousin Rachel's promotion at her law firm was celebrated with a toast. My existence was acknowledged primarily through well-meaning but condescending suggestions about potential employment opportunities and questions about my personal life, all asked with the same concerned tone one might use for someone recovering from a long illness. "Are you seeing anyone special?" my mother managed to ask during dessert, her eyes hopeful. "Not currently," I replied. "I have been quite focused on work." "You know, Elizabeth has a wonderful cousin about your age," she continued undeterred. "He is a doctor at Brigham and Women's. Perhaps we could arrange something." I smiled tightly. "I am really not looking for setups right now, Mom." The conversation shifted to healthcare costs, as Elizabeth's father, who I learned was a hospital administrator, discussed challenges facing modern medical systems. I perked up momentarily, forgetting my decision to stay under the radar. "The biggest issue is data integration and predictive analytics," I said, unable to help myself. "Most hospital systems are using outdated technology that keeps critical information siloed. It leads to inefficiency, increased costs, and suboptimal patient outcomes." Elizabeth's father looked at me with newfound interest. "That is exactly right. We just implemented a new system at our hospital to address that very issue, but the transition has been challenging. What system did you go with? I asked, genuinely curious. It is from a newer company, actually. Something tech. Neuro. I cannot recall the exact name, but their approach to predictive analytics is revolutionary. The early results have been impressive. I felt a strange flutter in my stomach as Elizabeth suddenly focused her full attention on me, her eyes narrowing slightly as if seeing me for the first time. NeuraTech, she asked, looking directly at me. I nodded, surprised. You are familiar with it. Wait a minute. Elizabeth put down her champagne glass with deliberate care. Sofia Williams. She said my name, slowly connecting dots in her mind. You are not just working at a healthcare technology company. The table conversation continued around us, but Elizabeth was now studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. James mentioned you were working on some sort of healthcare software, but he never said. She leaned forward, lowering her voice to an incredulous whisper that somehow cut through all other conversation. Wait, you are Sofia Williams from NeuraTech, the founder. And just like that, the entire table fell silent, every head turning toward us. My father's fork clattered against his plate. My mother's mouth opened slightly, her dessert spoon suspended in midair. James looked like someone had just dumped ice water over his head. The founder of what my father demanded, his voice cutting through the silence. The silence that followed my father's question seemed to stretch into eternity. Every eye at the table was fixed on me, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. I felt a momentary urge to shrink, to deflect, to minimize, as I had been doing for nearly 2 years around my family. Instead, I sat up straighter and met Elizabeth's gaze. Yes, I am the founder and CEO of NeuraTech. Elizabeth broke into a wide, genuine smile. I thought so. I recognized you from that profile in Healthcare Innovation Monthly. Your company is doing amazing work. My father's hospital system just contracted with you, and the results have been incredible. She turned to the table at large, apparently oblivious to the shock rippling through my family. NeuraTech is revolutionizing how hospitals use patient data. Their artificial intelligence platform has reduced readmission rates at my father's hospital by 20% in just 6 months. It is being called one of the most significant healthcare technology breakthroughs of the decade. James was staring at me like I had suddenly grown a second head. You are that NeuraTech, the one all the medical technology publications are talking about. My father's face had transitioned from shock to something more complicated, a blend of disbelief and defensive anger. If this is true, why haven't you told us anything about it, Sofia? You never tell us anything about your work. The irony of his question was so absurd I almost laughed. I had tried to tell them repeatedly from the very beginning. They had just never been interested in listening. My mother quickly attempted to rewrite history in real time. We always knew Sofia was working on something special with her computer skills. I told my bridge club just last month that my daughter was developing important healthcare software. That was the breaking point. After years of diminishment, months of condescension, and the constant implication that I was just killing time until I found a real job, I could not let this revisionist history stand. No, Mom. No, you did not. My voice was calm but firm. What you actually told Aunt Patricia last month was that I was still figuring things out and that Dad was keeping an eye out for suitable positions at the bank. I turned to face my father directly. I tried to tell you about NeuraTech from the very beginning. I showed you the business plan, the market research, the prototype. You told me I was throwing my life away on a fantasy. You have never once asked a genuine question about my company or expressed any interest in understanding what I am building. Now wait just a minute, he started, his face flushing. But I was not finished. NeuraTech now employs 25 people. We have contracts with 32 hospitals across the country. We raised $2.5 million in our first funding round 6 months ago, and the company is currently valued at $20 million. I have been profiled in multiple industry publications and will be a featured speaker at the Healthcare Innovation Summit next month. I could see the information hitting each family member differently. James looked stunned and slightly embarrassed. My mother appeared to be mentally calculating how to incorporate this new reality into her social narratives. My father seemed caught between pride at the numbers and discomfort at being proven so dramatically wrong. "Why didn't you tell us any of this?" My mother's voice held a note of genuine hurt beneath the accusation. I took a deep breath. "Because you made it clear from the start that you weren't interested. You decided my company was a failure before it even began. Every time I tried to share even small successes, you responded with job suggestions or commented on how I could still go back to Gartner if I came to my senses. After a while, it just seemed easier not to share at all than to face the constant dismissal." Elizabeth, perhaps sensing the tension, jumped in with well-intentioned support. "Sofia's algorithm is truly groundbreaking. The neural network approach to patient data analysis is unlike anything else on the market. My father's hospital saw improved patient outcomes within weeks of implementation." "It is true," Elizabeth's father added, looking at me with new respect. "When our technology director first recommended NeuraTech, I was skeptical of working with such a new company. But the results speak for themselves. You have built something remarkable, Miss Williams." The formal address, so different from the patronizing "Sofia dear" I had been hearing all evening, landed with satisfying weight. James finally found his voice. "Sofia, I had no idea. I knew you were working on something with healthcare software, but I thought it was just... I didn't realize it was so significant." "Because you never asked," I replied, softening my tone slightly. "None of you ever really asked." The silence that followed felt different from the shocked silence earlier. This was the silence of recalculation, of mental narratives being reluctantly revised. My father cleared his throat. "Well, it seems we may have underestimated the potential of your business venture." Coming from him, this was as close to an apology as I was likely to get. I nodded my acknowledgement but did not rush to make it easier for him. My Aunt Patricia, whose concern about my employment status had been a constant background noise at family gatherings, suddenly brightened. "I always said Sofia was the smart one, so innovative, starting her own company. I told Robert just last week, didn't I, dear?" She nudged my uncle, who nodded with the uncomfortable expression of someone being drafted into a lie. One by one, relatives who had been offering me job leads and expressing concern about my future began recasting themselves as early supporters, each claiming to have always known I would do well, or to have told everyone about my promisingly business venture. The rapid revision of history might have been amusing if it had not been so transparent, so clearly motivated by the sudden realization that the family disappointment had become someone worth claiming connection to. Elizabeth, perhaps the only genuinely supportive person at the table, reached across to squeeze my hand. "Your company is doing important work. You should be incredibly proud." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "It has not been an easy journey, but it has been worth every difficult moment." I looked around the table, taking in the faces of my family members, as they struggled to adjust to this new reality where I was not a failure after all, where the path they had disapproved of had led to greater success than they could have imagined. Part of me wanted to savor the moment, to soak in the vindication after so many months of dismissal. But another part, perhaps the wiser part, recognized that continuing to sit there accepting their belated congratulations and watching them rewrite their previous attitudes would ultimately bring me no real satisfaction. I had not built NeuraTech to prove them wrong. I had built it because I believed in its potential to make a difference. "If you will all excuse me," I said, rising from my chair, "I should be going. I have an early meeting tomorrow with our development team." "But we haven't even had coffee yet," my mother protested. "And you haven't told us about your company. We want to hear everything." The sudden interest coming after years of indifference felt hollow. Another time, perhaps. Tonight should be about James and Elizabeth. I smiled genuinely at the couple. "Congratulations again on your engagement." The dinner was lovely. As I gathered my purse and wrap, I felt lighter than I had in years around my family. I had finally spoken my truth, and while the validation felt good, what felt even better was the realization that I no longer needed their approval to know my own worth. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool Boston evening, taking a deep breath of the salt-tinged air. For the first time since starting NeuraTech, I felt fully aligned both personally and professionally. The double life where I was a failing daughter in one context and a successful founder in another had finally collapsed into a single authentic reality. My phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. Your family is in shock. In a good way. You are amazing. Lunch soon. I smiled and typed back a simple yes. And thank you. At least one good thing had come from this evening. I had found an unexpected ally in my future sister-in-law. The morning after the engagement dinner, I threw myself into work with renewed focus. The Healthcare Innovation Summit was approaching, and my presentation needed to be perfect. Yet even as I refined slides and practiced my delivery, part of me remained distracted processing the events of the previous evening. I had expected to feel triumphant after the revelation at dinner, but what I felt instead was a complex mixture of vindication, sadness, and strange relief. The masks had finally dropped. My success could no longer be minimized or ignored, but it had taken external validation from Elizabeth and her father for my family to acknowledge it. 3 days after the dinner, my assistant Maddie appeared at my office door with an unusual message. "Sophia, your father is in the reception area asking to see you," she said, clearly uncertain about the protocol for this unprecedented situation. "He does not have an appointment. Should I ask him to come back another time?" I took a deep breath. "No, it is fine. Please show him in." A minute later, my father stood awkwardly in the doorway of my office, looking distinctly out of place in his traditional navy suit amid the modern open workspace of NeuraTech. I watched him take in the environment, the wall of windows overlooking the Boston skyline, the awards and press mentions displayed along one wall, the buzz of activity from the team members visible through the glass partition. "This is quite impressive," he said finally, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "Thank you. Would you like to sit down?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat stiffly, placing his briefcase beside him, his hands coming to rest on his knees. For perhaps the first time in my memory, my father looked uncertain. "I thought perhaps I should see this company of yours for myself," he said after a moment, "since it appears to be more substantial than I had realized." The understatement would have been comical under other circumstances. "Would you like a tour?" I offered. He nodded, and for the next hour I guided him through the NeuraTech offices, introducing him to team members, demonstrating our platform, and explaining our technology in terms he could understand. I watched his expression shift gradually from polite interest to genuine amazement as the scale and significance of what I had built became impossible to deny. In the demonstration room, he watched silently as Ryan walked through a simulation, showing how our system had identified a treatment complication for a stroke patient 24 hours before conventional monitoring would have detected it. "And this actually saves lives?" he asked quietly when the demonstration ended. "Yes," I said simply. "It does." We returned to my office, where he sat again looking at me with an expression I had never seen before, something close to respect. "I was wrong about your company," he said finally, the admission clearly difficult for him. "I did not understand what you were trying to build, and I did not make an effort to learn." Coming from my father, this was the equivalent of falling to his knees and begging forgiveness. I had imagined this moment so many times, yet, now that it was happening, I felt no urge to press my advantage or make him grovel. "Thank you for saying that," I replied quietly. "It means a lot to hear it." "Your mother and I," he started, then paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "We wanted security for you. We have always wanted that. When you left Gartner, all I could see was risk. I could not see the potential." I understand that I said, and I did. Their concern, however, frustratingly expressed, had come from love, however limited and conditional that love had sometimes felt. But I needed you to trust that I knew what I was doing, or at least to ask questions, instead of just assuming I was making a mistake. "I am not good at that," he admitted, and the simple acknowledgement of this truth felt like a breakthrough in itself. "I never have been. I see the world in certain ways, and He hesitated. "I find it difficult when reality does not conform to those ways." We talked for another hour more honestly than we ever had before. For the first time, my father asked real questions about my business, my vision, my journey. He did not try to offer advice or steer me toward his definition of success. He simply listened, and in that listening was a form of respect I had craved for longer than I cared to admit. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Your mother would like to see you when you have time. She has been thinking about things as well. My mother's attempt at reconciliation came in a different form. She appeared at my apartment the following weekend with a cardboard box I recognized from our attic. "I found some things I thought you might want," she said, placing the box on my kitchen counter. Inside were artifacts from my childhood that I had forgotten existed. The certificate from my first coding competition and middle school newspaper clippings about the website I had built for my high school at 16, the acceptance letter from MIT that had received such a lukewarm response. "You kept all of this?" I asked, genuinely surprised. She nodded, a hint of embarrassment in her expression. "I always kept everything. I just did not always understand what it meant." We sat at my kitchen table looking through the mementos together. She asked questions about NeuraTech, tentative at first, but increasingly engaged as I explained our mission and impact in terms she could relate to. "I was afraid for you," she admitted finally. "Starting your own business seemed so precarious. I wanted you to have the security I never had growing up. My parents struggled so much financially, and I promised myself my children would never face that uncertainty." "I understand that, Mom. But security can look different for different people. For me, building something meaningful provides a different kind of security than a steady paycheck." She nodded slowly. "I am beginning to see that, and I am very proud of what you have accomplished, Sofia. Truly proud." The words I had longed to hear for so long felt bittersweet now, coming after external validation had forced her to acknowledge my success. But I could also see the genuine effort she was making, and that counted for something. Over the following months, our family dynamic shifted gradually. My parents began mentioning NeuraTech to their friends without prompting. My father sent me articles about healthcare technology with actual questions rather than thinly veiled suggestions that I reconsider my career path. My mother asked to see photos from conferences where I spoke. James and I developed a closer relationship than we had ever had as adults. Over lunch one day, he admitted his own part in dismissing my ambitions. "I think I was jealous in a way," he confessed. "You were always building something, creating something new. I just followed the path that was laid out for me. It was easier, but sometimes I wonder if it was braver to do what you did." Elizabeth became an unexpected champion and friend. With her background in art curation, she had a completely different perspective from my tech-focused world. Yet she understood better than anyone in my family what it meant to pursue excellence in your chosen field. "Would you consider mentoring me?" she asked one day over coffee. "I am thinking about starting a digital art consultancy, and I would love your insights on building a business." 6 months after the fateful engagement dinner, my family attended NeuraTech's major product launch event. Watching my father listen intently to my keynote speech, seeing my mother engage genuinely with my team members, observing James explain proudly to other attendees that the founder was his sister, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with business metrics or valuation figures. The company continued to grow, expanding to 60 employees and opening a second office in Chicago. Our valuation reached $50 million, and we were being courted by major healthcare systems internationally. The success brought new challenges and opportunities, but I faced them with a confidence solidified by the journey. The greatest lesson I learned throughout this experience had little to do with business strategy or technological innovation. It was about the courage to define success on my own terms, even when those I loved most could not understand or support that definition. It was about believing in my vision when no one else could see it, and staying true to that vision through the darkest moments of doubt. True success, I discovered, was not measured by external validation or impressive metrics, though those were satisfying. It was measured by the integrity with which I had pursued my path and the impact my work was having on real people's lives. It was about creating something meaningful that would not have existed if I had succumbed to others' limited expectations. The most profound freedom comes not from proving others wrong, but from releasing yourself from the need for their approval in the first place. My family's belated recognition was welcome, but it was no longer necessary for my sense of self-worth. That had been the real transformation. Have you ever had to choose between meeting others' expectations and following your own path? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding courage when everyone tells you you're wrong. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes the people who know us best can still underestimate what we're capable of achieving. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, your potential is not defined by others' ability to recognize it.